This is Amanda Koji doing my presentation on research for digital libraries for the University of South Florida, course LIS 5268. So first we need to decide what is a digital library or a digital collection. Basically, it's a collection of electronic materials. That can be anything from books, journal articles, maps, essays, audio files, video files, pretty much anything that you could find in a physical library, but in a digital format, whether it's stored on a computer or in some other kind of digital way. A little bit of background about some digital collections and digital libraries. One of the founders of it is a man named Paul Otlet, and back in the late 1800s, he actually came up with this idea to be able to interlink millions of documents and images and audio and video into one searchable system. He wrote this down in a paper called Birth of the Information Age. And he called this system and I might pronounce this wrong, so I apologize, but he called this system the Mundanuum. And basically it was just that. It was really sort of this thinking of, we should be able to put all of these things into one system where we can look at the information and very easily be able to access it. Like I said, again, this was back in the late 1800s, so this was thinking way, way, way beyond like even the age of technology. He also worked really closely with a man named Henri Lafontaine to create the Universal Decimal Classification System, which of course later then went on to become, which was based off the Dewey Decimal System, and later, became another cataloging system for libraries. The other person that was really a pioneer with all of this and sort of had kind of come from Paul Otlet was Vannevar Bush. And in 1945, he wrote As We May Think. And really, this sort of paper came from him doing work with scientists and stuff and really essentially helping to create the atomic bomb. And when he saw the disaster that it created at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, he was like, you know what? We can create this technology. This has to be able to be used for something better than just destruction. And so he started developing on, this a lot more. And he created the Memex, which was basically, if we think about it, really kind of our first computer system. It was a machine that could compress and store books and, be consulted with exceeding speed. When you first saw this, it was basically, it took up an entire desk. It was lots of monitors. It was a keyboard. This was not like our little desktop computers that we're used to seeing now. So really, it was Vannevar Bush and it was Paul Otlet that really were sort of the founding fathers, I guess you could say, of kind of creating this idea of a digital library and a digital collection. And in fact, it was their ideas that eventually sort of also led to just the basic creation of what we now kind of think of as the internet in general. And then, in 1994, the Digital Library Initiative was created. And this was a really, really big project that was sponsored by the NSA, DARPA, and NASA. And they looked at, I think it was like 6 to 8 universities. And they really, really just studied these, and they studied, all of their resources and stuff that were coming in. And they're the ones that kind of produced this digital library reference model, which our online and digital libraries are created from today. It was a little bit before this also that if you work in the library system, OPAC sort of came from all of this at the same time. And then we kind of go from that to the Robert Logan and Marcia McLuhan. And they had sat down and they had begun writing this book called The Future of the Library, From Electric Media to Digital Media. And really, so they had started this in the late 1970s, and unfortunately McLuhan passed away before the book ever went to press. But Logan kind of kept and sat with it, and he kept looking as the technology evolved, and he kept looking at how libraries were going more from this physical being into this more digital meaning, and how not necessarily how they were being replaced by it, but how they were starting to integrate it. And as all of this was happening, he began to incorporate some footnotes into this original book that they had written, or not footnotes, but parenthetical notes rather, into this book that they had written. And so then more than 35 years later, Logan decided to finish this book. And he did that by putting in just all of these parenthetical notations to update the information that he and McLuhan had originally created. He didn't want to change any information that was already there, because he wanted to sort of, for people to be able to see how, things have evolved since when they first started doing this. But one of the most important things that Robert Logan has mentioned, like throughout this book, is that yes, digital collections are important, and yes, digital collections are becoming more and more prevalent. However, physical collections are not going to go away anytime soon. And he brought up a really good point at one time, saying that, digital reading is great, but when you're really trying to do a deep reading, it's not as easy to do a deep reading on something digital as it is when you have that physical book. In a physical book, you can flip through it, and you can mark things, and you can do all of that stuff. Whereas if you're in a digital format, it's a lot more difficult to just sort of scroll through and find all of the stuff. You don't tend to concentrate it on it quite as much as you normally would on that physical being. So he was really much like, yes, digital libraries and digital collections are important, but as important as they become, the physical is not going to go away. And so then some of the benefits that we kind of come to with having our digital libraries is obviously that you don't have a limitation of physical space, right? You can now hold this in the palm of your hands the way that our smartphones work these days. And we have computers, whether we have our own personal computers or at work or at school or at a public library, you can use these things. They're more universally accessible. Anybody can get to them. You don't have to be able to be in a physical library to be able to get to this information. The other thing is that the information is accessible at any time. It could be 1 o'clock in the morning and you're trying to do research, or you're trying to find out information, or you want to get that book, whether it's to download it or whatever, you can get this information at any time. And then also, because we don't have that limitation of physical space, really it allows us to have more materials within a collection. You can even have a lot of like little sub collections within a big collection. You can have your books, you can have your audio files, video files, maps, essays, journal articles. You can have all of these things in the palm of your hand versus having to try to create, the physical stacks that you would normally see in a traditional physical library setting. But then, of course, anytime that you have the advantages, you're always going to have the disadvantages. And so the advantage is sort of a catch-22, a double-edged sword, if you will. That yes, we have more universal access, but we are still limited by the amount of technology that we have. And so some of that is, yes, more people can get to it, to these digital collections. But if you take people, for example, if we start looking at the ADA side of it, what about people with sight restrictions? Yes, we have a text-to-speech, but that technology isn't really that great yet. And so they really still don't have the same benefits, whereas if they're in a physical library, they have somebody that can help them, and you just don't have still have the same benefits. The other big thing is that information overload. You start to search something, and if you don't know how to really research something properly, whether you're in Google or a database, you can just really get too much information that you don't even know how to process all of it, and you give up on it a lot easier versus going into a physical library and you just go, oh, okay, I have these books to look at. And then, of course, we also have the plain technology restrictions. You have the bandwidth. You have not having access to technology. What happens when, your power goes out or if the internet goes down. You have all of these technology restrictions that we encounter on a day-to-day basis. And so that, in short, is sort of what my research has been about digital collections. A lot of it was really the history of digital collections. Where did it start from? Where is it going? The advantages of it and the disadvantages of having them. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the research.